Hey there, my name is Sage, and you are watching D&D Daily. Today I'm going to be doing a deep dive into the Peace Domain Cleric. In this video I'm going to talk about their features, their strengths and their weaknesses, and a bit of a build at the end of the video. Before jumping into these videos, I like to talk about how I personally go about reviewing my subclasses. For me, I'm going to be looking at what only this subclass can pull off and doing my build around that. So if there's something really good that the Cleric can do, maybe even better than what the subclass can do, but the subclass does something unique, I'm going to choose the unique thing because that's just the way I like to play. So without further ado, let's jump into the Peace Domain Cleric. At level 1, we get the Implement of Peace and Emboldening Bond features, as well as the Heroism and Sanctuary spells. Implement of Peace allows us to gain proficiency in Insight, Performance, or the Persuasion skill. Not a powerhouse of a feature, but a nice way to differentiate our Peace Domain Cleric from another Peace Domain Cleric. Overall, it's a simple quality of life feature. Emboldening Bond, on the other hand, is a powerhouse feature. You choose a number of willing creatures equal to your prof bone within 30 feet of yourself, and this can include yourself. For 10 minutes, while any of these bonded creatures are within 30 feet of one another, they can roll a d4 and add the number to an attack roll, ability check, or saving throw. They can only do this once per turn. This feature can be used a number of times equal to our prof bone per long rest. This is very reminiscent of the Bless spell, which is one of Cleric's best spells, but it's better in several key ways. Keyway number 1 is it's not taking our concentration, so we can still use powerful concentration spells like Bless, for example. So instead of a d4, now we're getting 2 d4s, which gets pretty insane pretty fast when you're adding 2 d4s to your saving throws or 2 d4s to hit. Really powerful right out the gate. It also lets us do ability checks, which Bless notably does not, so we can do this out of combat to be better at infiltration or intelligence checks or whatever checks we need to make it's going to help us do. This feature also scales extremely well because every time we gain a bump in our proficiency, not only are we able to cast it on more people, we're able to cast it more times a day. Overall, this is a very powerful feature that's coming right out the gate. As for spells, we get Heroism and Sanctuary. Heroism is usually not on the Cleric spell list, so we get a little bit of extra versatility here. For me, Heroism is mostly about making someone immune to the frightened condition, so it's a reaction-based spell. Hey, my buddy's terrified right now, I'm going to cast on him so he no longer is. However, it also does give temporary hit points every single turn, so if there's somebody that's being specifically targeted for whatever reason, you can get quite a bit out of those temporary hit points, though I consider that secondary. Now, if you have a character like an Ancestral Guardian's Barbarian who is incentivizing people to attack them, okay, then the temporary hit points can really shine in this situation. As for Sanctuary, this is a spell that all clerics get. The best part about Sanctuary is that it's a bonus action, so it can be weaved into turns that are kind of down turns. Now, this is a spell that really requires you to pay attention to initiative. Because if you cast this on an ally who's going right after you, as soon as they attack, well, now it's just been a wasted spell slot. But if you cast it on somebody who just had their turn, or yourself because you're just having your turn, it can really protect them for that round. It's really good for a Protect the President situation where you're protecting an NPC who's not attacking. It can be really amazing in that situation, but it can also just be good as a Peace Domain Cleric specifically because our Emboldening Bond feature is so powerful. If we just use it and then cast Sanctuary on ourselves and just really rely on our Emboldening Bond to carry us, well, then we just really strengthen our own defenses and let the party really handle the situation. Not ideally, we probably want to help with our damage output, but that's kind of, I think that's why they put it here, is that the idea for the Peace Domain Cleric is that you just set your team up for success, then you just kind of relax. This is the first instance of that, but we see it later, so I think that's part of the intention of the designers, is to have us literally be at peace in the middle of combat and let all of the combat resolve itself. So yeah, if we believe our team's damage output is going to be enough, we can simply use it on ourselves and just focus on buffing our allies and keeping our Emboldening Bond up and healing when necessary. And speaking of healing, at level 2, we get our Channel Divinity Balm of Peace. Using Balm of Peace, we move up to our movement speed without provoking opportunity attacks, and when we move near an ally, they heal 2d6 plus our Wisdom modifier once per turn. This can be a lot of healing, especially at early levels. It's actually premium healing at early levels. And unlike the Life Domain Cleric, who can only heal up to half of our HP, this can heal even if you're above half. So in many ways, this actually outshines the best healer's healing, and that's kind of interesting that this this character is out healing the healer, but they are in many situations. That's how it is, and it's situationally better because depending on our team's positioning, we may or may not be able to get to the amount of people to really make it better. But depending on the situation, it can be a lot better. So it's kind of a usually better, not always better type thing. This feature is very reliant on our team's positioning and the amount of speed we have, so keep that in mind when you're making your build. This could very well be the best healing in the game at this level, and especially for how inexpensive it is, it's just really, really good. At level 3, we get Aid and Warding Bond. Aid is a cleric staple and a standout level 2 spell. You will likely be using it often, so having this on your subclass spell list is just going to act as your cleric tax relief. Now you can take another spell, because we are probably going to take this one. Warding Bond is another cleric spell, and it really does fit the Peace Domain flavor. We give a target +1 AC, and we take half the damage that they take. They basically have resistance, and then we take the same amount of damage, but mechanically speaking, more often than not, it just means we're taking half the damage. This is great as a backline caster, because we want the person who we casted the spell on to be taking the damage while we hold back and just kind of absorb some of it for them. And the fact that they have the +1 AC means overall our team's taking less damage, so it's really cool. And it does really fit the flavor, but keep in mind that we really don't want to put this on our barbarian because they already have resistance. Overall, mostly because of the flavor, but also because it's good, I am a big fan of this spell. At level 5, we get Beacon of Hope and Sending. Both are already cleric spells. Beacon of Hope would probably never get used because who would prepare something so situational? But having it in our spell list all the time means it could be fantastic in a heavy wisdom saving throw scenario. Sending is basically a text voice message spell. It's a fun, flavorful, keep the DM on their toes kind of spell. It won't be winning any combats, probably. At level 6, we get the Protective Bond feature. When someone who is affected by our Emboldening Bond feature is about to take damage, a second bonded creature within 30 feet of them can use their reaction to teleport within 5 feet of the attacked creature. The second creature takes the damage instead. This feature in many ways takes your party's individual healths and turns them into one big health pool. Meaning, if enemies want to get through that big health pool, they're going to have to do absolutely chonky damage to get through it. This takes the Peace Domain from really good to insane. It really changes the game, and not necessarily in the best of ways. I look at this feature with a grain of salt. I say that because as a DM looking at this feature, it can be problematic. If I expect them to use their Emboldening Bond feature, I need to do a ton of damage to even be threatening. But if they don't use their Emboldening Bond feature and my monsters still do the same damage output, they're absolutely going to tear through them. So it's a feature that really makes balancing as a DM difficult. Not to mention that this feature also comes with exploits, where now you can cast Emboldening Bond and your teammate can try and punch their other teammate, and then somebody can use their reaction to teleport to take the 1 damage. So basically you have infinite teleports for the duration, and you can really increase your team's mobility out of combat, which really isn't what this feature was designed to do, and it does feel kind of gimmicky. So I would put a stop to that as a DM, but it is technically raw. And if you're a player, I would recommend not making your DM have to deal with that or make that choice, because it is really cheesy. So if you decide to play Peace Domain Cleric, avoid being gimmicky that way. My suggestion only. At level 7, we get Aura of Purity and Resilient Sphere. Aura of Purity has a list including blinded, charmed, deafened, frightened, paralyzed, poisoned, and stunned. All allies within 30 feet of the caster has advantage on saving throws against these conditions, as well as immunity to disease and resistance to poison damage. While this is technically situational, there are so many situations it's good in because it blocks so many effects. It's hard to call it situational because it's useful in many situational situations. It really fits this midline support, which the Peace Domain slots right into. And so I think it's a fantastic spell on our spell list to react to any situation where those statuses are really coming into play a lot. Odaluk's Resilient Sphere is a spell normally not usable by clerics. It's an interesting spell that can be used both offensively and defensively, and it really only has a few counters, namely Disintegrate and Dispel Magic. Magic and physical objects can't pass through this sphere, including magical effects, so it can be used to become invincible in a lot of situations. Though note that the person trapped inside can't get attacks or spells through the sphere either, so we can use it in an emergency to escape danger, or we can use it to enclose a troubling enemy out of the fight completely. This has overlap with our Sanctuary spell. This can do a similar thing where we set up our Emboldening Bond and then just put ourselves in a sphere to never take damage. Note that you can teleport in and out of the sphere, so if you decide to go block damage for your teammate, you're getting teleported out of the sphere, you're not bringing it with you. Which is unfortunate or fortunate depending on your point of view. At level 8, we get to take the choice between Blessed Strikes and Potent Spellcasting. I don't see me ever using a weapon, ever, as Peace Domain Cleric, so I am going to take the Potent Spellcasting. Though, honestly, it's not a big decision either way. Just do you. At level 9, we get Greater Restoration and Rary's Telepathic Bond. Greater Restoration is a cleric staple, so it's really great that we just get to have it on our spell list and not worry about it and can go take some more adventurous spells. As for Rary's Telepathic Bond, it's another amazing spell that clerics normally don't get. So it's a ritual spell, which we actually can take advantage of, which instantly makes this spell a spell we're going to want to have up all the time, and I mean that literally all the time. It gives our party the ability to communicate telepathically. It's simple, it's straightforward, but it's really effective and really great to have on our spell list. And I gotta mention that it really fits the Peace Domain flavor, which I do like. At level 17, our subclass capstone feature is Expanding Bond. The range of our Emboldening Bond and Protective Bond features are now doubled, and on top of that, when Protective Bond is used to take someone else's damage, the Protector now has resistance to that damage. This feature allows a lot more flexibility as far as movement and positioning is concerned, and on top of that, basically takes that pool of health that our team represents and doubles it. So this is insane. This is taking what was already insane about the Peace Domain Cleric and making it even more insane. This is getting into absurd territory. And I mean that, like, it will truly take insane amounts of damage to even threaten your party if they have a Peace Domain Cleric at level 17. So moving into the build discussion, the Peace Domain is clearly built to be a midline caster. This is similar to the Grave Domain Cleric. They both want to keep all their party members within 30 feet of themselves and support both the backline and the front line at the same time. So they're kind of the glue between that front line and backline, acting as that core of the party. You make your party way better just by existing, and then you have a lot of spells in your back pocket for situational moments against, specific types of debuffs that they can be throwing at your party and conditions. You can counter those. Now, our damage output isn't going to be as high as other clerics, but our damage mitigation is genuinely top tier. We'll also keep our allies from failing saving throws just in general, both with our Emboldening Bond and those back pockets spells that come from our subclass spell list. Our best damage output will be our Potent Spellcasting with a Spiritual Weapon, and if we get pushed, Spiritual Guardians. At the end of the day, Emboldening Bond is so good that all we really need to do is use it. And it just gets better as we level up. So everything else is just a cherry on top. That's why you take Peace Domain Cleric, is because Emboldening Bond is just that insane. As for roleplay, I would personally lean into that single line in Emboldening Bond's description that says, and I quote, "You can forge an empowering bond among people who are at peace with one another." I would make it a complication if people were arguing or wanted to do different things, or just in general were not at peace with one another. I wouldn't let this feature look personally. I'm not even saying as a DM I would do that to a player who's using Peace Domain Cleric. If I'm using Peace Domain Cleric, I wouldn't allow it to work, just to give it some sort of check and balance because of how powerful it is. I would try and be the peacemaker. I would try and get through combat situations without resorting to combat. I would try to be the glue between the party and trying to make them, see each other's perspective and get along well. So for me, when it comes to that first level skill that we get to choose from Implement of Peace, I would choose Persuasion to fit that flavor I'm going for. So moving into the conclusion of the Peace Domain Cleric, I am so close to loving this subclass. And the reason for that is the same reason I love the Order Domain and I love the Grave Domain. It's the fact that they really focus on teamwork and get people working together and feel like you're doing combos. And I do really like the flavor of this class, how it's creating these bonds between people and having them work together. And I love how the spell list really focuses on that as well. I think this is a really well-flavored spell list. Even though most of them are already on the Cleric spell list, I still think it's well designed. But here's my problem with Peace Domain versus those other subclasses that I really like. Peace Domain is literally an on-off button. You have one feature. All of your features just make that one feature better. And that one feature is already really good. So all you're really doing is turning on an on button. And that's it. You're done. turn on your on button, you can go to sleep, basically. You really don't have to do much past that. That's not very fun for me. I'd rather be a Grave Domain Cleric, which I will say is objectively not as good as a Peace Domain Cleric, but I'd rather be it because it's more interesting and there's more decision-making points to be had. I will say that the Peace Domain is the most powerful midline support in the game. Just period. It's so powerful, but I don't think it's very fun. It's just an on button or an off switch, which I don't love. As I mentioned before, it's powerful in a problematic way, where it's very difficult for a DM to balance when they have a Peace Domain Cleric in their party. So what I want to say here is that if you decide to play the Peace Domain Cleric and your DM says it needs to be nerfed, know that it's not personal. Don't begrudge them that decision because they're not doing it as a personal attack. They're doing it because the Peace Domain literally has the ability to ruin the table experience for many players. Long story short, love the flavor, love how it's team-based, but don't love how it's an on and off switch and its power level is just too high for a simple on and off switch. That's my conclusion. But what do you guys think? Am I right to be so critical of the Peace Domain Cleric, or am I wrong? Is it actually amazing and well balanced? Let me know in the comments down below. This has been a Cleric Subclass deep dive, which I have already done a ton of, and I'm going to do many more. So if this video was interesting to you, check out that playlist because you're going to find many more just as interesting. We release new D&D content every single day, so if that's interesting to you, hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you tomorrow. Peace out.